All right, welcome in. It is the April 23rd Breer Report. We are just over 24 hours away from the start of the 2025 NFL Draft. I can't wait. One of my favorite times of year. I've loved this since I was a little kid. It used to be an all-day Saturday event. I actually, honestly, kind of miss that, having the first three rounds there starting at noon on Saturday. Nonetheless, we're going to kick things off on Thursday night here. And we wanted to give you the chance to ask me questions because this week we're not doing a print mailbag. We've got plenty of written content on the mmqb.com, but obviously I'm spending a lot of time on the phone and doing rumors columns this week and doing a mock draft this week. And so in lieu of that, we're going to get to a couple more questions here than we normally do. Normally I answer 3 questions here. I will only answer 5 instead. May get to a few more of the questions on Twitter as well. A little later in the day after we post the video mailbag. But again, keep it locked on the mmqb.com. We're going to have a ton of content for you guys all week. And we're going to start here with our first question. It's from Ryan McCoy. That's at Dragon McCoy. Do the Bears trade up to number 4 to draft Jeanty? I would be surprised if they went that far up. I could see a short move. And I know the concern for the Bears here, if you did want Jeanty, would be that the Jaguars are going to take him at number 5. I certainly think that that is in play. But where the Bears are right now, with a new coach in place, a new coaching staff in place, I think they've got more needs than just the running back position. And the other thing about it is that they can address running back later on. They've got Roschon Johnson there. They've got DeAndre Swift. I don't think they feel like they're desperate at the position. Getting Jeanty would be a special opportunity, but there are good players at the position later in the draft. So I see the Bears, in all likelihood, probably sticking there at 10. I think offensive tackle would certainly be in play for them. Kelvin Banks, if he makes it there, I think would be a possibility. I also think the chance exists that Mason Graham gets there. And I wouldn't have thought that maybe a week ago. But now I think it's a very real possibility that he gets there, and the new defensive coordinator there, Dennis Allen, could see some shades of Brian Brzee, who he had in New Orleans, in Mason Graham. I think it'd be an interesting fit. It'd be another add to their defensive front, if they can't land Jeanty or one of the top 3 offensive tackles. Question number 2, this is from Zachary at Francisas. What run on a position would cause the most chaos in round 1? Zach, I certainly think the offensive tackles and the way they come off the board will be the thing that would create the most movement. And the reason why is because it's going to be really hard to get one later. So as I see it, you've got 2 tiers of first round prospects. You got the first tier, and I think these 3 could all be off the board within the top 10. And that's LSU's Will Campbell, who I think probably goes 4th overall to the Patriots. And then you have 2 guys in Missouri's Armand Membu and Texas's Kelvin Banks. And I think either of those guys could be the pick for the Raiders at 6. I think Membu could go to the Jets at 7. I think Banks could go to the Bears at 10. So I think there's a very good chance those 3 guys come off the board in the top 10. And then I think the question becomes, when are the next 2 guys going to come off? You've got Josh Conerly from Oregon, and you got Josh Simmons from Ohio State. Conerly still needs to get stronger, but he's a younger player. Like, all these guys are younger, and he's a younger player. So Conerly, has to grow into his body a little bit more. There's the hope that he can become stronger and more physical, but he's a very talented offensive lineman. And then Josh Simmons might have the best tape in the draft. There's just not a lot of it. And he's coming back from a really devastating injury, as a patella tendon injury. Those things can be tough ones for big men to come back from. There's a question on whether or not he's going to be ready for training camp. What version of him are you going to get in 2025? So, I look at those 5 guys, and there's a drop off after those 5 guys, at least perception wise, with NFL teams. And so the first 3 guys come off in the top 10. Then maybe if one of these guys comes off the board before 20 somehow, and I'm not sure I see that happening, but if one of these guys come off the board before 20, I'm not counting Gray Zabel, who I think is going to go somewhere in the 12 to 18 range, then you could get a team like Houston coming up for one. So I think that's certainly part of the equation. At other positions, there's just like a lot of unknown. Corner's another one. Will Johnson has a knee condition that has teams concerned about his longevity. I think he could slide. He's also got a toe issue. Jedi Barron, some teams view him as a guy you can move all over, and other teams view him as just strictly a nickel. So I think perception with him is going to vary from team to team. And then you go to the next group, Maxwell Hairston, I think could go inside the top 20, certainly somewhere in the 20s. Trey Amos, Revel from East Carolina is coming back from the ACL. Even Azare Thomas from Florida State, I think he could sneak in the back of the first round. So there's just a lot of unknowns at a lot of these positions. The edge position, I think you're looking at potentially maybe 4 picks and 5 slots from 15 to 19 with Atlanta, Arizona, Cincinnati, and Tampa all sitting there. Is that where James Pierce comes off the board? Is that where Mike Green comes off the board? Is that where Jahad Campbell comes off the board? Is that where you see a Donovan Ezeraku come off the board? There's just so much unknown. So when you say chaos, I think there is a little bit of a chaotic feel to this first round in general, just because it's so flat. But if there's if there's a position that's going to cause movement again, I go back to that offensive tackle position. My third question is from Mike Madden. That's at Mike _ Madden. Will Campbell, talk of him being a great guard. So why not still take him high? I think teams don't wish they took Yanda, Faneca, or Hutchinson in the top 5. I don't get the position hesitation. Someone has to block the Jalen Carters of the world. Mike, I think the main reason why is because of the ability generally to get these positions later on. I think what makes the premium positions is they're really hard to find elsewhere in the draft, right? I think this applies less to receiver, but it definitely applies to quarterback. It definitely applies to left tackle. It definitely applies with your edge rushers, and it definitely applies with your corners, where it's harder to find those guys later in the draft. I think with guard and center, there's the feeling that you can find them later in the draft, and if you have a deficiency there, it's easier to manage. But I don't hate the idea of Will Campbell as a guard. And I'll tell you, I think based on and Elliott Wolf's coming from Green Bay, the way they do it in Green Bay, the way they did it under Elliott Stad, Ron Wolf, the way they did it under Ted Thompson, the way they do it under Brian Gutekunst, is if they take a guy who there's some question of, they take him, they put him at tackle, they'll let him fail there first, and then they'll move him to guard. And I think that will be the case with Will Campbell if he does wind up with the Patriots at number 4. And I don't think it's a bad idea to look at like what happened in Washington last year, where they drafted Brandon Coleman. I believe it was in the 2nd round, maybe the 3rd. They started him at left tackle, and now they've acquired Laramie Tunsil and moved Brandon Coleman inside. Look at the best teams in football. The best teams in football, the 2 teams in the Super Bowl this year, Philadelphia paid Landon Dickerson over $20 million a year, just made Cam Jurgens the highest paid center in the history of football. And Cam Jurgens beat the contract that was done by Creed Humphrey in Kansas City. So they paid Creed Humphrey in Kansas City at the top of the market. That was after going and paying Joe Thuney on the free agent market. Now they trade Joe Thuney because they're going to pay Trey Smith and make Trey Smith the highest paid guard in football. So the most successful teams in football are invested in those positions. So I don't mind the idea of taking a guy, saying like, let's see if he can play left tackle. And then if it doesn't work out, you have the flexibility of turning him into one of the best guards in football. Question number 4. This is from Charles Boswell. That's at Plabard. He has surprise quarterback selection. I think if Shedeur Sanders doesn't go 21, then I think Jaxson Dart will be the 2nd quarterback off the board. How's that? And that isn't just based on what I think about one team. It's what I think it's based on what I think about how the league sees these 2 players. And I'll give you guys a little snapshot from a couple months ago. The first time I started to kind of get this feel that, and I was saying for a while that I thought the gap between Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders was bigger than the difference between Shedeur Sanders and the pack. Now I think the gap between Shedeur Sanders and the pack might not even really exist. And this anecdote was from early on, and I remember kind of filing this away. But this was an offensive coordinator I was talking to who had been looking at them, who said to me like that he preferred Jaxson Dart to Shedeur Sanders. And I said, why? And he said, his game translates to the NFL more. And he gave me this one anecdote. He said, when you watch the 2 guys get in trouble, Jaxson Dart moves forward, Shedeur Sanders moves backward. What that means is when the pocket collapses, Jaxson Dart is keeping his eyes downfield and maneuvering and climbing the pocket, where Shedeur Sanders, his eyes are still downfield, but he's bailing out of the back of the pocket. And the thought there is that Jaxson Dart, what he's doing is sustainable in the NFL. Whereas with Shedeur Sanders, he's not a great enough athlete to get away if he's doing that in the NFL. So he's going to have to rewire himself and rewire the way he plays to fit the NFL game. I thought it was an interesting way to look at it for two guys that aren't off the charts physically, don't have great arms, aren't insane athletes. I think Dart's a little bit of a better athlete than Shedeur is. But I think these two guys are really comparable just as prospects. And I think for that reason, there is the chance that Dart winds up going in front of Shedeur. So that will be a surprise quarterback selection. I also think Tyler Shuck, Cleveland maybe somewhere at the top of the second round. Like, I don't think the order of these things is set in stone whatsoever. This is from Anthony Amico. That's at Amic Sta. He asks, "Hey Albert, how do you explain the recent surge for Tet McMillan? Feels like only a week or two ago, he was sliding into the late 20s or teens." I would say that this is all based on perception. And I think if you go back to the fall, you'll see Tet McMillan was seen by a lot of people as being a likely top 10 pick. And I think as people like me started to dig into it, started to talk to teams more, there's a little bit of a football character question with him. And there's a speed question with him. And then he ran mid 4.5s, high 4.5s at his pro day, which is a friendly environment, which confirmed the speed question. That said, he's hyper productive, a great contested catch guy. So, like, how do you view him? And I felt for a while now that he very well could slip into the 20s. But part of that, for me at least, was the nature of the draft class, is that you have a lot of guys like him. You have a lot of guys that are good, not great prospects. And so once you get past, your Hunter and your Carter, like, is there a huge difference between 4 and 14? Is there a huge difference between 5 and 25? No. So I think this is going to be a draft where a lot of teams are looking at it and saying, we're just going to take the guy we like because we don't think there's a big difference. And in most years, if you have a guy you like and you say, okay, like, we'll trade down, we want to trade down 10 spots, maybe you have a partner to do it. But in a year where things are so flat, like, are you going to have a market for that? What's somebody coming up for? So I think that's the big question now. And but I think the reason why you're seeing him surge is because there's been the connection to Jacksonville. I think we first made it on Monday. And part of that's me putting the pieces together. I think Liam Cohen wants a skill player. Liam Cohen had bigger receivers in Tampa, and guys like Mike Evans, and even Chris Godwin was a bigger slot. And then if you look at Trevor Lawrence and when he had his greatest success at Clemson, what was it with? It was with bigger receivers. It was with guys like Justin Ross, guys like T. Higgins, the bigger, stronger receivers. And so, in my mind, at least, when you look at this and you see where they're at, and the Jaguars sitting there at 5, could they just say, we like Tet McMillan, we're going to take him 5th overall? I certainly think that could be the case. Appreciate you guys coming out. Again, we got a ton of content on the site. No mailbag on the site this week, but a ton of content on the site this week. My mock draft will come out tomorrow. I got another What I'm Hearing column going up. I would urge you to look back at our needs column, our annual needs column, which covers all 32 teams, and my quarterbacks report, which was up on Tuesday. All of that is live now on the site. I will tweet it out too, so you guys can have it in one place, and you'll be able to access all of it from there. And we got more great content coming for you. I think we're going to do another Breer report ahead of the draft on Thursday. Again, always appreciate you guys coming out. Any feedback you have on how we're doing all this week too. Again, I love this week, so would love any feedback you guys have. At Albert Breer on Twitter, at Albert_Breer on Instagram, at Albert R. Breer on Facebook. We will see you guys tomorrow.